Hi folks, welcome to part 2 of my MP7 Bone Yard Rebuild series. Now part 1, if you haven't seen it, the link will be somewhere. Go and have a look at that. It was a little bit drawn out, but it showed in detail how to strip these down. In this one, we're going to strip down the gearbox, and there's going to be a fair bit of detail in that. Again, it can't be avoided, a little bit like the first episode. In between times, I have stripped back using my media blast cabinet all the metal parts and recoated them in matte black. Now the video and the clips don't do these justice. When they come from the factory, even if they haven't been two-toned, they tend to look very, you can tell it's a plasticky toy coating. These parts now look like real steel parts, they look that good. The shell I have primed in white primer, and you might be asking why would you go for white primer, because if you put black on top of that it'll chip and you'll see the white. But I'm not going to be painting it black. I have put the white primer on there because I need that white bright base for the camouflage pattern I'm going to put on there. What camouflage pattern am I putting on? I'm not telling you. I'm only kidding, I will tell you, but that's going to be in part 3. Now one thing I said in part 1 is that the shell was made from polycarbonate, and that's quite embarrassing for me because I worked a number of years in the plastics industry. And it looks like it isn't actually polycarbonate after all. I suspect it might be another polymer called PETG. And I'm not even going to try and pronounce that one, I'll put it on the screen somewhere. I got a little bit suspicious about it being polycarbonate. So I tried rubbing a little bit of acetone on the inside of it, and it barely attacked the plastic at all. In fact, it would be safe to say it didn't. So that's a classic sign of PETG. And what that allowed me to do was get all that blue two-tone paint off with just simple acetone. So I wiped it down with an acetone soaked rag first, that got the bulk of it off. Then I used a paintbrush with soft bristles and that got into all the corners and got me back to that bare plastic. I then scuffed up the bare plastic with a Scotch Brite pad, and once it was all matte, all the shiny spots of the plastic removed, I gave it 2 coats of adhesion aid like I did in the helmet video, and then I built up the white primer. So I've got an excellent base that's really stuck onto the gun and is really going to help my camouflage pattern look great when it goes on. But anyway, enough of that. Let's get to stripping the gearbox down. I know a lot of you are nervous about stripping gearboxes, and you probably shouldn't be. They can spring open even if the piston's fully forward. There's a lot of spring pressure in there, and with these being smaller than the AEG gearboxes, they are more fiddly. But I've got big hands, fingers like cow's tits, and if I can do it, anybody can. Let's get going. So this is the AEP gearbox, and off camera I've took out the 4 screws because it's pretty tedious. There's one in there, one in here, one down here, and one up the top. The one up the top's actually sheared, cheap shit screws, but we'll get that out once the casing's apart. I'm just going to undo the motor adjustment here and hopefully get it apart without too much drama. So wind that out. To the side. Right, here goes nothing. On AEG gearboxes you can put a screwdriver up the spring guide and hold the screwdriver down, and that stops the whole thing from popping out. You can't do that on these because it's a solid back plate, so you've just got to hold the cylinder as best you can and start levering. There we go, start to lift. Just go round, doing it a little at a time. Still try to keep my fingertip down inside the cylinder there. You see it starting to lift. And there we go. Be careful with the top half here because you don't want to lose any of the bushes. We might be replacing those, but you don't want to lose any bits in the meantime. Now I'm keeping my finger on that power cylinder there, the brass part, and very gently push and lift out the spring guide, and that is it, safe. There's nothing in there that can go boom anymore, so it is just a straightforward disassembly now. So spring guide and spring, out we go. Power cylinder, piston and cylinder head, just lifts it out. There's the piston. The cylinder head, we'll probably be replacing that. And I think I've maybe found a problem with the nozzle to the hop up. We'll check that. Basically, I don't think the nozzle was coming forward enough to ever seal on the hop up. That could be down to, well, it's a Marui clone, but we know that the quality on the clones is lower. It's maybe just a little bit of attention to detail that they haven't got when they've been reverse engineering it, so we'll see. You can also see there, maybe a wee bit, the seal has been pinched and it's been put in, so that was never going to seal, just around here. It's been actually popped out its groove. We'll replace that as well. Power cylinder, not much to say there, it's fine. Now the gear set, it's all sort of fell over, but you can still see. So here we go, there's the 4 gears in there. Pull them out, 1, 2, 3, and that's your anti-reversal latch at the bottom there. You see it's very fiddly because it's small. I don't actually like that. That's a plastic anti-reversal latch. So I'll maybe see if I can find a metal one of those. And that's the final gear. Now what you've got to do, we'll be rechecking this anyway, but there's a little shim on each of those there. So for the time being, I'm going to preserve the factory shimming, because I mean, if these plastic bushes are in good condition, initially I might just reassemble with those in place, but when I replace it with metal ones, they'll need new shims. But for the time being, let's try and keep them in place. I'll pair them up with their respective gears in a while. That's the tappet plate, moves the nozzle back and forward. Get the spring out in there. And that's the motor. There's a auto adjustment plate just fell out there. The motors for these are quite hard to find, or at least everybody thinks they are. There's a couple of models that they use in the radio control racing community that will fit with slight modification, and you can get very good quality motors, so it's not as much a concern as what people might think. That's it tidied up a little bit. It's quite fortunate that sheared bolt in the casing half just came right out with a pair of pliers. There was enough of it left there to grip, so a little bit of heat on it and it came out no problem. The reason for it, you know, gripping and shearing in the first place was because bizarrely they'd used thread locking compound on the screws, which is a good move, but on a budget cheap gun which is likely to fail inside, why use thread lock? I mean, just seems a bit silly. But anyway, I'll replace all those screws because they're really poor quality, really soft metal. Yeah, they'll be going in the bin, and they'll be literally pennies to replace anyway. But this is the AEP gearbox exploded out, as you can see. So, like I said earlier, power cylinder, main spring. I think on the Marui clones, the cheaper well guns, these springs are maybe underpowered. I'm not entirely sure. I do have some Marui springs to try, and I think it's Eagle 6 Airsoft do a really uprated one. It's quite powerful, very hard to put back in the box, but we'll see. I'll hold off on that. I have tried it in my VZ61 and it was getting about 310 feet per second, so that's for an AEP, that's superb. If I can get this to 250, I'll be delighted. But anyway, next part is the spring guide, which is plastic. You can get metal replacement ones. Piston, not a lot to say there. It'll hold up to pretty much anything you throw at it. It's just some form of plastic, but I've never seen one fail yet. There's always a first for everything. The nozzle, like I said earlier, I think there's going to be a problem with that. That or the hop-up chamber design. You know, when you're changing nozzle lengths, it's a strange one. Everything interacts with everything else, so if you make that longer so that it meets the hop-up, it might not then go far back enough to take a BB. If I move the whole hop-up closer to the gearbox by shaving it down, then the BB loading tube at the bottom of the hop-up isn't going to line up with the magazine. So a wee bit of thought there, if my suspicions are correct. Might need to make a new hop-up chamber. We'll see. Cylinder head, explained the problems with that already. During assembly at the factory, I mean, these are just thrown together, I imagine. The O-ring has been really badly damaged, so that was never going to seal. That's the tappet plate that moves the nozzle backwards and forward. That's the tappet plate return spring. Motor, the motor adjustment, that performs the same function as the small grub screw in the bottom of your full-size AEGs. It sort of drives the motor in and out of the gearbox to adjust against the bevel gear, and if it's too tight it's not going to run efficiently. If it's too loose it's going to strip and wear quicker. So you get that running, you tweak it, and the best way I've found is to listen to the gearbox. You can hear when it starts to labour if it's going too tight, so you just get it to that point and then back it off. Anti-reversal latch, as I said, plastic, don't like that. Looking at it, it'll be a very easy piece to make, so I might just make a steel one if they're not easily available or if they're too expensive. The casing halves, nothing wrong with them, just pretty standard there. As I say, I got that sheared bolt out, so that was quite fortunate. And there's your 4 gears. Now, a full AEG gearbox has 3 gears. It has a spur gear, a bevel gear and a sector gear. This has 4, and that's because you've got 2 small gears transferring the power between the bevel gear and the sector gear, doing the same job that the spur gear does in an AEG box basically. So here we've got the bevel gear that takes the power from the motor, transfers it through 90 degrees. That rotational force then runs through these 2 gears, which emulate the spur gear in a full-size gearbox, and transfer it to the sector gear, which pulls back the piston, releases the piston, and at the same time is knocking the tappet plate back and forward, which is feeding the BBs. So it's similar in principle, but just a little bit different. And again, like I keep saying, because it's so small, it really makes it a lot fiddlier. But it's going to be pretty straightforward to get back together. It's just the handling of it. Now, the bevel gear goes in this slot here. Motor shaft runs in here. Bevel gear. These 2 gears go here and here, and the spur gear goes there. And that is really all there is to it. And the main problem with it is that it's just so small. But we'll get these parts cleaned up. I'll get the replacement parts, in fact I might have some of them in my spares bin as it is, and we'll get it back together. So there we are, that's the gearbox stripped, and I hope this has been useful to some of you. I know the footage could be better, my phone has a lot of problems with autofocus, but I'm just having to work with what I've got. So in the next video, I'm hoping to get this gearbox back together with the new parts that we discussed. I'm hoping to investigate and nail down those issues with the hop-up, as well as optimising the hop-up unit itself and polishing out the barrel. That'll make a big difference to how this gun works when it's back together. Then we'll get on to the finishing of the gun with the camo pattern that I have in mind, and get it all back together and see how it fires as it should have if it came from the factory in tip-top condition. After that, we'll modify it and see if we can get the power up. Now, I said earlier that I would like to see 250 feet per second from this. That's not a lot, it's not very powerful, but the sight limits at most sites around about here are only 328, and a package like an MP7 is only ever going to be used up close or as a backup weapon. So 250, if it's shooting consistently and accurately, should be spot on. If I can get more, I'll take it, but we'll see. I don't want to put a big powerful spring in there like the Eagle 6 one I mentioned. It's going to put a lot of stress on the gearbox, and I would prefer reliability over outright power. Now, through the week, I did pick up another gun. I can't help myself. It's one I've been looking for a while. You'll know this one straight away. It's the Steyr AUG. This is an ASG model, officially licensed, and it's not a breaker's yard gun. I got it second hand from a guy who plays at the local site, and I'm in love already. It'll be a good one when it's done. It just needs a lot of TLC, and the thing that strikes me about it is that it has, for a short overall length, a very long inner barrel, so there could be potential for a good DMR platform there, and the DMRs are often allowed a higher feet per second limit, so that would give me the scope for more power. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this one. I hope it's been useful to you, and I'll catch you in the next one.